Today's book is An A to Z of ELT by Scott Thornbury. A to Z in the sense that it's alphabetical from A to Z. ELT for English language teaching. So this is another book for English language teachers. It's not a pleasure reading book. This is for professional development, although it's not half bad. But yeah, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me just kind of talk about what this is and how I came to read it. So this book, believe it or not, in some form has been on my shelf for about 4 years now, ever since I did the Delta Module 1 4 years ago. Now I did the Delta Module 1 by distance. When you do it by distance, they send you a reading list. And on the list, they have a list of books. And then some categories, they say either this book or this book. In one category, they have either an A to Z of ELT by Scott Thornbury or the Dictionary of Language Teaching and Applied Linguistics by Jack C. Richards and Richard Smith. So I got them both printed. Now, these are not usually books you read straight through cover to cover. They're encyclopedias or reference books or dictionaries, I guess. They kind of go through alphabetically kind of all the major issues in English language teaching or applied linguistics and language teaching, and they've got an entrance for each one. Sorry, entry for each one. So one thing I noticed kind of straight off the bat, just kind of flipping through these books 4 years ago, is Scott Thornbury's book is a lot more digressive, a lot more in-depth, a lot more conversational maybe is the word I'm looking for. So take this, for example, interaction, SLA. So he's got kind of like a whole page on this where it's brief, it's to the point, but it's also kind of more of like, almost more of a short essay on the topic than it is like a dictionary entry. Whereas the Longman Dictionary of Language Teaching and Applied Linguistics is much more dictionary-esque. So, for example, you can see kind of their entries here. So, machine translation, macro-sociolinguistics, macrostructure, and they're much shorter. Now, if you flip through here, you do kind of find a few longer entries on kind of subjects that are more complicated. Here's a bit of a longer one. But the general tendency in this book is to be kind of shorter and more dictionary-esque. And the general tendency in this book is comparatively to be a bit longer and a more kind of conversational in tone. So, again, you're not really supposed to read through these books straight through. But, I don't know. Because I've got a certain personality, I want to try and check books off my book list or get stuff under my belt. I have been kind of struggling with both of these. At one point, kind of shortly after I discovered Quizlet on the computer, on the internet, I thought, oh boy, Quizlet would be a great way to kind of study this Delta terminology. I had already been using kind of Quizlet for my students, but I thought, why let the students have all the fun? Now, of these two books, because this one is kind of much more shorter and to the point, this one kind of is much better for Quizlet. So I kind of use this for Quizlet, and I got almost all the way through the letter A before I kind of stopped doing it. Mostly just kind of burnout, although I was kind of questioning how much good Quizlet was doing me. It was teaching me to kind of recognize words based on association, but I wasn't sure I was really learning it. Some of this is off topic. As a different subject for a different video is kind of the limitations of Quizlet. I have a book club at work. We read kind of one book on the Delta reading list every month. And actually, this book gets brought up a lot. People are always like, oh, let's read an A to Z of ELT. And I was like, no. You don't want to actually read that book. That's a reference book. Nobody actually would read it. But then, about a month and a half ago, I was in the school library. This is kind of the school library copy you can see because it's got like this library color coding. And don't remember why, I just kind of picked this book up and I was like, I wonder what Scott Thornbury thinks about universal grammar. I wonder what Scott Thornbury thinks about reported speech. I wonder what Scott Thornbury thinks about the PPP method. I mean, I kind of knew some of this because I've read some of his other books, but it was just kind of interesting to flip through and kind of read sections at random. And as I was just kind of standing there reading it, I thought, this actually is kind of interesting. And then I thought, you know what? I could read this straight through. I mean, like, not in one sitting, but I thought I could take this home. I could read just like a couple pages a day. I could read something while I'm eating breakfast, and I could just kind of gradually work through it. And that's what I did. So, advance warning, even though we're like 5 minutes into the video or something like that by this point. But I'm not going to have that much intelligent to say about this because it's essentially a reference book. So, like, I'm not going to be able to kind of get into the subject in depth or something. There is no subjects, it's just a reference. But I'll just talk about a few things, my reading experience, etc. I guess maybe one thing I should get out of the way, just kind of to clear up any possible confusion, is there are kind of three books floating around, three entities floating around, known as the A to Z of ELT. There was this book, published in 2006, and there's also Scott Thornbury's blog, which is, you may have heard of this because it's very popular with TEFL teachers. It's a WordPress blog, and apparently, according to the About section on the blog, Scott Thornbury started that blog up as a way to kind of keep track of any supplemental stuff he wanted to add to this book for the new edition, anything he wanted to correct for the new edition. And it was just kind of a way of kind of storing that online. And as he says in the blog, kind of add pressure to his publishers to publish a new edition. And then sure enough, a new edition came out. I think the new edition came out just last year, was it? This year? 2 years ago? Recently. The new edition just came out recently. The new edition is called A New A to Z of ELT. This one is the old edition, the 2006 one. Anyways, I bring that up because that blog is quite popular among English teachers. There's a lot of interesting stuff on there. I myself have kind of been reading it from time to time. And it's so often when English teachers talk about that, they're talking about his blog, but it also originated with a book first. So the reading experience. I read through this from cover to cover because if you're going to go through this systematically, you might as well. I enjoyed it for the most part. This is the kind of thing where if you just kind of take it slow, a couple pages a day, maybe a page during lunch, it's all sorts of interesting little tidbits. Now, small confession, I'm going to be leaving within the next couple of days. So I wanted to finish this before I left. So the last few days, I was kind of pushing myself to kind of read the last 100 pages. There are 250 pages in here total. So I got to about 150 pages, reading it leisurely. I did the last 100 pages, kind of pushing myself. And if you do that, it's not quite so fun, especially kind of as you're slogging through some entries that might be less interesting than others. For example, I found kind of the linguistic theory entries quite interesting, but something like the grammar and function, the grammar, I find grammar interesting. I've become a grammar nerd over the years, but some of the discourse or functional entries, the functional stuff was all the ways to make suggestions, all the ways to make warnings, all the ways to make requests in English. And some of that stuff got a little bit boring for me. There's also the question of when you read a book like this, how much do you retain? Does it just kind of go in one ear and out the other? I like to think I've retained a bit of this. Of course, I just got done reading this, so, you know, ask me again in 3 years and I'll probably have forgotten all of it. At this point in my career, I've got enough of a background here that most of this was stuff I was already familiar with or quasi-familiar with. So it was just kind of either refreshing or it was just kind of refreshing with a couple kind of new details added. That being said, I did kind of notice as I got near the end that he sort of, because it's a dictionary, so it's all cross-referenced, like it's see also this entry, see also this entry, right? Like see also bilingualism. And I started, when I got to near the end, I started thinking, I don't remember reading that. Did I read that entry? And then I'd go back and be like, oh yeah, I did read that entry. So there was a little bit of that. But yeah, on the whole, I found it very useful review of stuff I've already studied, some additional information. Now, it's organized alphabetically because it's meant to be used as a reference. When you're reading it cover to cover, of course, that organization is not so useful because it would be more useful if it was all organized by similar topics. Because like you have one topic and then you don't get to a similar topic until you get near the back of the book when that topic comes up again. So in that respect, but it's a reference book, so that's kind of what you expect. So like I said at the beginning, Scott Thornbury writes in kind of a conversational style. He kind of takes time to kind of get in depth, semi-in depth with a lot of these entries. Even the longer ones seldom kind of go above a page. There are some, I think, for example, the one on writing is like 2.5 pages or something. Here's the entry on writing. Starts here, goes all the way here. So in that case, it is kind of like, almost a mini essay rather than a dictionary entry. And so that kind of stuff can get interesting. I don't think I really have that much intelligence to say about critiquing it. And in fact, to be perfectly honest, I think I had 1 or 2 areas of disagreement while I was reading this book, but I don't really even remember what those are now. There's just so many entries. The only thing that really sticks out to me as kind of something that went against my expectations or I thought could have been done more with it mentions a lot of kind of the new age stuff that's in this field. So for example, neuro-linguistic programming, multiple intelligences, learning styles, which obviously you have to mention it because like it or not, that's had a huge influence in English language teaching in the past 40 years. But I thought he could have been a little bit more critical than he was. Multiple intelligences, I think there was like half a sentence where he indicated there was some criticism of this, but on the whole, he just kind of reported it uncritically. Learning styles, he had like a paragraph which said, okay, it's not clear how much of this can result from learner training or can be influenced by learner training, but on the whole, it kind of was not very critical of this stuff. And my impression is that these kind of pseudo-scientific things like learning style, multiple intelligences, and neuro-linguistic programming have largely fallen out of favor because there was just not that much science to back them up. Now, to be fair, this was written in 2006. And I think the backlash against a lot of this stuff has come pretty recently. So I haven't actually read the new edition of this book, but I did go to Scott Thornbury's blog, the A to Z of ELT blog, and sure enough, if you look up learning style on his blog, he does say, you know, I wasn't critical enough back in 2006. And he cites some articles and research that have come out since then that have been critical about learning styles. So yeah, I hope I'm not making it seem like I'm smarter than Scott Thornbury or something like that. I as well have kind of just been kind of influenced by the fact that I've been reading a lot more kind of critical stuff recently. And 10 years ago, I wasn't critical of this stuff at all because I wasn't reading stuff that was critical of it online. Yeah, so this is the 2006 edition. The new version, yeah, who knows? Somebody else will have to review that. I suspect it's largely kind of the same, but bigger. Anyways, to kind of sum up, it's a reference book. You're not supposed to read it straight through, but the general tone of this is kind of conversational and it's interesting enough that I think you could read it straight through and kind of get something out of it. Yeah, and I feel like I got some stuff out of this. Okay, that's it for today.